Hello everyone, I'm Father Brett Williams. As you may know, I hope you know, the Catholic Church is undergoing a process of consultation, of speaking and listening. And this process has been nicknamed the Synod on Synodality. It's a really big process, one of the biggest consultations in the history of the world. And because it's such a big process, it's maybe a little bit confusing. Perhaps we don't fully understand what is happening, what it's about. So I thought I would give a little summary of the process, help us to understand a little bit better what a synod is, what synodality is, and what the process is. I thought it would also be important to give us an update on where we are in that process and what has happened and what we know. I'm sure many of you will remember that there was a consultation process that took place towards the end of 2021. That consultation process required of each diocese to listen to the people in the diocese and then to forward a report to Rome. Recently, Rome has released a sort of summary of this consultation process, and they have asked all of us to listen to that summary, because by listening to that summary, by praying over it, by reflecting on it, we get to hear the voices of the universal church. We get to hear what the people are saying in Australia and South America and Iceland, all over the world. We get to hear what the church is saying. And so I thought I would break up this little summary into three bite-sized pieces, if you like. And the first piece is going to look at the history of synods, where they come from. The second, I will look at the process. And the third bite-sized piece will be a sort of summary of the working document that was released by the Vatican. A document entitled Enlarge the Space of Your Tent, a reference to the 54th chapter of the prophet Isaiah. So let's look a little bit at the history. Colleen Dalle from America magazine, which is a Jesuit publication out of New York, wrote a very, very good article at the start of the synodal journey. And I'm going to quote quite extensively from that article because it was such a very good article. We know that the global synodal process on communion, participation, and mission that the Catholic Church began in October 2021 has been nicknamed a synod on synodality. Now that term may leave some of us scratching our heads. Perhaps the nickname was given to make us understand communion, participation, and mission a little bit better, but those are complex terms, so let's break those down. What is synodality? And why does Pope Francis think it's so important or necessary for the Church? To understand synodality, we must first try to grapple with the concept of a synod. What is a synod? Simply, a synod is a meeting, a gathering, or an assembly of church leaders. And the idea of this gathering, this synod, has New Testament roots. The Acts of the Apostles, chapter 15. Go and have a look. In his book, called Inside the Vatican, Father Thomas Rees, another Jesuit, explains how synods became part of the life of the Catholic Church. he writes this: "The bishops who attended the Second Vatican Council liked the experience of having a role in the governance of the universal church, and so they looked for ways to continue this after the council came to an end. The Melkite patriarch, Maximus IV, suggested a synod of bishops, and he suggested that it be modelled on those of the Eastern churches. And so such a synod would be the supreme, executive, and decision-making council of the worldwide church. And all the Roman departments would be subject to this synod body." But before these discussions could mature, Pope Paul VI issued a document creating the Synod of Bishops. And this document had a much more limited scope. Pope Paul VI's model of a synodal church was of a standing body of bishops who were elected by their national or regional bishops' conferences. So for us, the Southern African Catholic Bishops' Conference. This body of bishops that Pope Paul VI established would meet every 4 years to discuss important church issues, with the Pope occasionally calling extraordinary synods, meetings to consult on issues that perhaps required a more immediate response. Unlike the Protestant or Eastern or Oriental synods, the Catholic Synod of Bishops does not have the power to make binding decisions. And it's important for us to keep that in mind. It does not have the power to make binding decisions. It is, instead, purely a consultative body for the Pope who makes the final call. When Pope Francis took office, he acknowledged that this body, the Synod of Bishops, was half-baked compared with the broader vision of collegiality that had been hoped for by the bishops meeting at the Second Vatican Council. What is collegiality? That all the bishops work together, that they're all part of the decision-making, that it's not just the Pope and a few select people who make decisions. So Pope Francis realized that the Synod of Bishops office that Paul VI had established wasn't doing that, wasn't achieving that. And so Pope Francis appointed a council of 9 cardinals from the different corners of the world to advise him. And that was the start of Pope Francis's idea, his vision of creating a more listening church. He also held extraordinary synods, like those on the family, we remember that, young people, and the Amazon. And he's held more extraordinary synods than any of previous pope. And the scope of these extraordinary synods has also expanded under Pope Francis. Before each gathering, he has urged the bishops of the world to hold local listening sessions in their dioceses, and he has invited more lay people, especially young people, to participate in the bishops' meetings in Rome. Synodality refers to the way that these synods make their decisions. It is a model that includes listening to a broad range of people and then discussing the issues together with the goal of hearing where the Holy Spirit is calling the church. Practically, Pope Francis has said, this means not entering the discussion with the idea that there will be winners who get their way and losers who do not. He has encouraged everyone to leave their personal agendas at the door and to speak with frankness, boldness, or courage, to listen humbly and to be open to the ideas of others. And so, in theory, no topic is off limits, and the Pope encourages disagreement and debate. After the discussions, the bishops of the Synod usually draft a document, and they vote paragraph by paragraph to approve that document. The Pope then uses that document that they have given to inform his decisions following the Synod. Ultimately, the goal is to reach consensus, which does not always mean the idea that most people support will be embraced by the Pope. He can reject it. Making decisions synodally is a top priority for Pope Francis. In a speech celebrating the 50th anniversary of the establishment by Pope Paul VI of the Synod of Bishops, Francis said, "It is precisely this path of synodality which God expects of the Church of the third millennium." The Holy Father would like to see this type of decision-making not only among the bishops meeting in Rome, but at every level of the Church's life, beginning with the laity, then the pastors, the bishops, and of course, finally the Pope. It is clear that Pope Francis still thinks that there is a long way to go before the Church is making decisions synodally at every level. In fact, it's quite difficult for us to even imagine what that may look like. We are so far away from that still. The papal biographer Austen Ivory wrote in the Commonweal magazine, "A church accustomed to a command and control model does not adapt easily to synodality." And that is true. We are seeing that. And that's why this 2-year synodal process. Pope Francis seems to have decided that the best way for the Church to move from a command and control model to a synodal model, the best way to do that is for us to all start doing synodality, to figure out what synodality is by putting it into practice, by trying it. Will the new process completely overhaul and change the Church's top-down decision-making? I don't think it's likely. But by drawing the entire Church into this participative process, Pope Francis aims to give Catholics an experience of a Church that comes together instead of fragmenting, that discerns together instead of making decrees in isolation, a Church that walks together. And hopefully we've had some experience of that in our parishes last year. We know that this process will be messy. It won't go smoothly. It is different from what most Catholics are used to. And by its nature, it involves disagreement. But it also involves listening, courage, humility, and respect. And those are virtues that today's Church could benefit greatly from. So that's the first bite-sized piece. I hope you'll join me for the second one on the synodal process. God bless. Bye-bye.